What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected voices refuses to back down from a talk show host's relentless attacks? In just 34 seconds, a single comment would shatter the facade of civility and expose the ugly truth behind the cameras. The studio lights were blazing hot that evening. Morgan Freeman sat across from Greg Gutfeld, his hands folded calmly on the armrest. The audience buzzed with anticipation. They had no idea what was about to unfold. Gutfeld leaned back in his chair with that signature smirk plastered across his face. He had that look, the one that said he was about to say something he thought was clever. Morgan had seen it before, on countless interviewers over the decades, but something felt different tonight. "So, Morgan," Gutfeld started, his voice dripping with manufactured enthusiasm, "let's talk about your latest project. Another one of those serious, meaningful films, right? Tell me, do you ever just want to have fun?" Morgan smiled politely. "I think there's great value in storytelling that makes people think. Entertainment and substance aren't mutually exclusive." The audience clapped lightly. It was a perfectly reasonable answer, but Gutfeld wasn't satisfied. Sure, Gutfeld said, waving his hand dismissively. "But come on, don't you think Hollywood takes itself a little too seriously these days? All this preaching and lecturing? Whatever happened to just making movies?" There it was, the first jab. Morgan's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened, just slightly. "I think artists have always used their platform to reflect on society," Morgan replied, his voice steady and measured. "That's been true since Shakespeare, since the ancient Greeks. Art has always been a mirror." Gutfeld laughed. It wasn't a genuine laugh. It was the kind of laugh designed to make someone feel small. "A mirror? That's a fancy way of putting it. Sounds like you've been spending too much time in those elite Hollywood circles, my friend." The word elite hung in the air like poison. Morgan shifted in his seat. The audience grew quiet. "I'm not sure what you mean by that," Morgan said carefully. "Oh, come on," Gutfeld pressed, leaning forward now. "You know exactly what I mean. All these actors and directors living in their mansions, telling regular people how to think, how to vote, how to live their lives. It's pretty rich, don't you think?" Morgan took a slow breath. "I think people in all professions share their perspectives. That's part of being human. Having a successful career doesn't disqualify someone from caring about the world." "But it does make you out of touch," Gutfeld shot back. "And let's be honest, Morgan. When was the last time you pumped your own gas? When was the last time you stood in line at a grocery store?" The question was designed to humiliate. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the fun, light banter they'd expected. "I'm not sure what my daily routine has to do with the film we're here to discuss," Morgan said, his voice still calm, but with an edge now. Gutfeld grinned wider. He thought he was winning. "It has everything to do with it. You're up there on your high horse, making movies about social justice and inequality, but you live in a completely different world than the people you're preaching to. Don't you see the irony?" Morgan's jaw tightened. "I don't think trying to shed light on important issues is preaching. I think it's responsibility." "Responsibility," Gutfeld repeated mockingly. "That's a nice word. Let me ask you something. Do you think your movie is going to change anything? Do you really think some film is going to solve the world's problems?" "I think it can start conversations," Morgan replied. "I think it can make people think differently. That's valuable." Gutfeld shook his head, still wearing that insufferable smirk. "You really believe that, don't you? You actually think you're making a difference? That's adorable." The condescension was thick enough to cut. Morgan's composure was legendary, but even legends have limits. "I believe art matters," Morgan said firmly. "I believe stories matter, and I believe that people with platforms have a responsibility to use them thoughtfully." "There you go again with that responsibility talk," Gutfeld interrupted. "Let me tell you what I think. I think Hollywood loves to pat itself on the back for being so enlightened and progressive, but really, you're just a bunch of hypocrites. You fly around on private jets while lecturing people about the environment. You live behind walls while telling people borders are wrong. You make millions while crying about inequality. The audience gasped. Some people started murmuring. This had crossed a line. Morgan sat up straighter. That's quite an accusation. Is it, though? Gutfeld continued, clearly enjoying himself now. I mean, look at you. You're worth millions. You've made a fortune pretending to be other people. And now, you want to lecture everyone else about morality? I've never claimed to be perfect, Morgan said, his voice low and controlled. But I do try to use my voice for good. That's all any of us can do. Gutfeld laughed again. That awful, mocking laugh. Use your voice for good. Listen to yourself. You sound like you're in some kind of cult. The Hollywood cult. Where everyone agrees with each other and anyone who disagrees is the enemy. I don't think I've suggested anything like that, Morgan replied. Haven't you, though? Gutfeld leaned back again, spreading his arms wide. Every time someone questions the narrative you guys push, they get canceled. They get blacklisted. They get called names. That's not tolerance, Morgan. That's tyranny. Morgan's hands gripped the armrests. I think you're conflating accountability with persecution. Accountability, Gutfeld scoffed. That's just another word for control. You people want to control what everyone thinks, what everyone says, what everyone believes. And if they don't fall in line, you destroy them. That's not true, Morgan said, his voice rising slightly for the first time. What you're describing isn't what I stand for at all. Then what do you stand for? Gutfeld challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you stand for whatever is popular in your little bubble. Whatever gets you applause at your fancy parties. The insults kept coming, each one more personal than the last, each one designed to provoke. Morgan took another breath. He was trying so hard to maintain his dignity, to not give Gutfeld the satisfaction of a reaction. I stand for treating people with respect, Morgan said slowly. I stand for listening to different perspectives. I stand for using whatever influence I have to try and make the world a little better. How noble, Gutfeld said sarcastically. And who decides what better means? You? Your Hollywood friends? The people who think they know better than everyone else? I think everyone has a right to their opinion, Morgan said. Except when that opinion disagrees with yours, Gutfeld snapped back. That's not fair, Morgan replied, his patience wearing thin. Isn't it? Gutfeld pushed. Tell me, Morgan. When's the last time you had a real conversation with someone who completely disagrees with you? When's the last time you listened to someone outside your echo chamber? I talk to all kinds of people, Morgan said. Do you, though? Or do you just surround yourself with people who tell you how wonderful you are? How important your work is? How brave you are for saying things that everyone in your circle already agrees with? The contempt in Gutfeld's voice was unmistakable now. He wasn't even pretending to have a civil conversation anymore. Morgan's eyes narrowed. You seem to have a lot of assumptions about who I am and how I live my life. Because it's obvious, Gutfeld said. You're all the same. Every single one of you Hollywood types. You think you're special. You think you're enlightened. But really, you're just privileged people pretending to care about regular folks. I do care, Morgan said, his voice hardening. Just because I've been fortunate in my career doesn't mean I've forgotten where I came from. Gutfeld waved his hand dismissively again. Sure. The classic I haven't forgotten my roots speech. I've heard it 1,000 times. It's always the same script with you people. With you people? Morgan repeated, catching the phrase. Yes, you people. Gutfeld doubled down. Hollywood liberals, celebrities, the cultural elite, whatever you want to call it. You're all reading from the same playbook. Morgan shook his head. You're not interested in a real conversation. You just want to attack. I'm interested in the truth, Gutfeld said. And the truth is that Hollywood has become a propaganda machine. And you're one of its most effective spokespeople. That's ridiculous, Morgan said. Is it? Gutfeld leaned forward again, his eyes gleaming. Every movie, every interview, every speech, it's all the same message. And anyone who questions it gets shut down. That's not art, Morgan. That's indoctrination. The word hung in the air like a slap. Morgan's expression finally cracked. The calm, measured demeanor started to slip. I think you're projecting, Morgan said quietly. Projecting? Gutfeld laughed. That's rich. You accuse me of living in an echo chamber, Morgan continued, his voice gaining strength. But you've spent this entire interview putting words in my mouth, making assumptions about my character, and refusing to actually listen to anything I've said. If anyone's trapped in a bubble, it's you. The audience erupted. Some people clapped. Others gasped. Gutfeld's smirk faltered for just a moment, but then it came back, meaner than before. Oh, now we're getting somewhere, Gutfeld said. There's that Hollywood arrogance I was talking about. See, this is what happens when you challenge them. They can't handle it. They fall apart. I'm not falling apart, Morgan said firmly. I'm simply pointing out that you're not engaging in good faith. Good faith, Gutfeld mocked. You want to talk about good faith? How about the fact that you came on this show knowing exactly what kind of program this is, and now you're upset because I'm not kissing your feet like every other interviewer? I expected a challenging conversation, Morgan said. What I didn't expect was personal attacks and bad faith arguments. Gutfeld's eyes flashed. Bad faith? You're the one who makes millions playing pretend and then lectures everyone else about reality. And I'm the one arguing in bad faith? Yes, Morgan said simply. You are. The audience was completely silent now. Everyone could feel the tension. This had gone beyond uncomfortable. This was hostile. Gutfeld sat back, crossing his arms. Well, I guess we've reached the point where the mask comes off. You can't defend your positions, so you attack me instead. I've done nothing but try to have a rational discussion, Morgan said, his voice steady again. You're the one who's been hurling insults since the moment I sat down. I've been asking tough questions, Gutfeld countered. Questions you clearly can't answer. You haven't asked questions, Morgan replied. You've made accusations and demanded I defend positions I never claimed to hold. Gutfeld laughed again. There it is. The victim card. Classic move. Morgan's hands tightened on the armrests again. His legendary patience was reaching its end. I'm not playing victim, Morgan said, each word deliberate. I'm simply observing that this conversation has been designed from the start to be hostile. Maybe if you spent less time in your Hollywood bubble, you'd be able to handle a little pushback, Gutfeld sneered. Pushback is fine, Morgan said. This isn't pushback. This is bullying. The word landed like a bomb. Gutfeld's face changed. The smirk disappeared completely. Bullying? He said, his voice dripping with false incredulity. You think I'm bullying you? The great Morgan Freeman, with your millions of dollars and your legions of fans, thinks I'm bullying you? I think you're using your platform to demean a guest, Morgan said calmly. Yes. Gutfeld's face reddened. Unbelievable. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You people can dish it out, but you can't take it. You spend years lecturing everyone, judging everyone, looking down on everyone, but the second someone challenges you, you cry foul. I haven't lectured anyone, Morgan said, his voice rising again. I answered your questions honestly, and you twisted everything I said. I didn't twist anything, Gutfeld snapped. I just refused to let you hide behind your pretty words and your Hollywood polish. There's nothing to hide behind, Morgan said. I've been completely straightforward with you. Have you? Gutfeld leaned forward, his voice growing louder. Because it seems to me like you came here expecting softball questions and praise, and now that you're actually being challenged, you can't handle it. Morgan stood up. The movement was sudden enough that the audience gasped. I came here expecting a conversation, Morgan said, his voice filled with quiet dignity. What I got was a performance, and not a particularly impressive one. Gutfeld's face went from red to purple. Sit down. We're not done here. Yes, Morgan said, removing his microphone. We are. The studio went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Every eye was on Morgan Freeman as he carefully placed his microphone on the chair. You can't just leave, Gutfeld said, his voice cracking slightly. The host's carefully constructed persona was crumbling. We have a contract. We have a show to finish. Morgan looked at him with an expression that could only be described as profound disappointment. I don't stay where I'm not respected, Morgan said simply. Respected? Gutfeld sputtered. I brought you on my show. I gave you a platform. And this is how you repay me? You didn't give me anything, Morgan replied, his voice still calm despite everything. I agreed to come here because I thought we could have a meaningful discussion. I was wrong. Gutfeld stood up too now, his composure completely gone. You're just running away because you can't defend your positions. That's what this is. You're a coward. The word echoed through the studio. Several audience members stood up. Some looked angry. Some looked shocked. Everyone looked uncomfortable. Morgan paused at the edge of the stage. He turned back to look at Gutfeld one more time. I've defended my positions clearly and honestly, Morgan said. You chose not to listen. That's not my failure. That's yours. Get back here, Gutfeld demanded, his voice shaking now. You don't get to walk off my show. Watch me, Morgan said. And he did. Morgan Freeman walked off that stage with his head held high, his dignity intact, his principles uncompromised. Behind him, Gutfeld stood there, red-faced and furious, shouting at his producers, at the cameras, at anyone who would listen. The studio erupted into chaos. Some audience members were cheering. Others were booing. Security didn't know whether to stop Morgan or help him. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of Gutfeld's meltdown. This is exactly what I've been talking about, Gutfeld yelled into his microphone, pointing at the door Morgan had just walked through. This is Hollywood arrogance. They can't handle the truth. They can't handle real questions. They live in their bubble, and the second someone pops it, they run away. But no one was listening anymore. The audience was too busy talking among themselves. The producers were frantically trying to figure out how to salvage the show. And Morgan Freeman was already in his car, driving away from the studio, away from the chaos, away from the disrespect. In that moment, as Gutfeld continued to rant to a crowd that had stopped paying attention, one thing became crystal clear. This wasn't a host holding a guest accountable. This wasn't tough journalism or brave questioning. This was a man so caught up in his own ideology, so convinced of his own righteousness, that he couldn't recognize basic human decency. Morgan Freeman had come to that studio to talk about his work, to share his perspective, to engage in dialogue. Instead, he'd been subjected to an ambush, a performance designed not to illuminate, but to humiliate. And when he refused to play along, when he refused to be a prop in someone else's theatrical display of superiority, he did the only thing a person of integrity could do. He left. The footage would spread everywhere. People would debate it for days. Some would say Morgan was too sensitive. Others would say he was absolutely right. But everyone who watched it would see the same thing. They would see a man maintaining his dignity in the face of relentless disrespect. They would see someone choosing self-respect over spectacle. And they would see Gutfeld, standing alone on that stage, shouting into the void, proving every point Morgan had made about bad faith and hostility. The interview that was supposed to make Gutfeld look bold and uncompromising instead revealed something else entirely. It showed a host more interested in performing than conversing, more interested in attacking than understanding, more interested in scoring points than seeking truth. Morgan Freeman walked off that show, but he didn't walk away defeated. He walked away with something far more valuable than a completed interview. He walked away with his integrity, his self-respect, his refusal to be diminished by someone else's need to feel superior. And that's a victory no amount of clever editing or spin could take away.